Have you ever watched someone be torn apart in public, slowly, deliberately, piece by piece, while everyone around them just stood there and did nothing? I have. And I want to tell you about the day it happened at the Halliburton Grand, one of the most prestigious hotels in downtown Toronto, and why the woman they humiliated turned out to be the last person in that building they should have touched. The morning of March 14th started the way most Thursday mornings start at a five-star hotel. Quietly, efficiently, with the kind of polished calm that costs money to maintain. The Halliburton Grand sat on Bay Street like it owned the street, which, in some ways, it did. 42 floors of glass and limestone, a lobby that smelled like fresh flowers and expensive leather. Staff trained to recognize a Rolex at 20 feet and adjust their smiles accordingly. Nathaniel O.C. Crane, the front desk supervisor, 38, a lean black man from Scarborough with 15 years in hospitality and a reputation for running the tightest shift in the building, arrived at 7:15 and immediately sensed something was off. Not the lobby. The lobby was perfect, as always. White marble floors polished to a mirror shine, a cascade of white orchids on the central pedestal, the quiet murmur of guests heading to early meetings. What was off was the energy among the staff. Whispers at the concierge desk. A cluster of housekeeping managers gathered near the service corridor, heads bent together. Someone from senior management walked past with a folder pressed against their chest and didn't make eye contact with anyone. Nathaniel set down his coffee, buttoned his jacket, and went to his post. By 8 o'clock, the lobby was filling up with the usual morning traffic. Business guests checking out, leisure travelers asking about breakfast, a tour group from Montreal waiting for their coach. Nathaniel had his team running at full speed. Priya on check-ins, Dev on concierge, and Annette floating between both. At 8:17, the front doors opened and a woman walked in alone. Her name was Serena Blatch Okonkwo, 31 years old, black, with close-cropped natural hair and the kind of stillness in her face that people often mistook for shyness. She was carrying a worn canvas tote bag on one shoulder and wearing a plain navy hoodie, dark jeans, and scuffed white sneakers. No jewelry except a thin silver ring on her right hand. No luggage, no assistant trailing behind her. She stopped just inside the entrance and looked around the lobby the way someone does when they already know exactly where everything is. Not tourist eyes, not first-timer eyes. Familiar eyes. She walked toward the front desk. Nathaniel noticed her immediately. He also noticed, before he could stop himself, the way Annette's expression shifted. Just slightly, just a flicker, from professional courtesy to something cooler. "Good morning," Serena said. Her voice was calm and even. "I'm here to meet with your general manager. Would you let him know that Serena Blatch Okonkwo has arrived?" Annette typed something. Looked at her screen. Typed again. "I'm sorry. I'm not showing an appointment under that name." "There may not be a formal booking," Serena said. "He would have received communication from our legal team this week. If you could just let him know I'm here." Annette's expression didn't change. "I'm afraid I can't just—" "Annette." Nathaniel stepped beside her. "I'll take this." He smiled at Serena, a real one. "Good morning. Could I get a last name again?" "Blatch Okonkwo." He reached for the phone behind the desk. But before he could dial, the door to the management corridor swung open and Gerald First stepped out. Gerald First, 54, white, the Halliburton Grand's general manager for 11 years, was a thick-shouldered man with silver hair, and the kind of confidence that came from never having been told no in a professional setting. He wore a charcoal suit, a pocket square, and an expression that he clearly believed conveyed authority. It conveyed something else entirely. He was already talking on his phone, gesturing with one hand, and he crossed the lobby at full stride without slowing down. He glanced at Serena. One full look, top to bottom, and kept walking toward the elevator bank. Serena watched him. "Mr. First," Nathaniel called. Gerald raised a finger without turning around. "Give me a minute." Serena didn't say anything. She just stood at the front desk with her canvas bag on her shoulder and waited. Gerald finished his call near the elevator. He tucked his phone in his jacket pocket, looked around the lobby, seemed to remember something, and walked back toward the desk. He didn't address Serena. He addressed Nathaniel. "We have the Morrison group arriving at 9. I need someone on the door." "Yes, sir. I'll sort that now." Nathaniel paused. "This is Serena Blacho-Conquo. She's asking to meet with you directly. She mentioned correspondence from a legal team." Gerald's eyes moved to Serena. He looked at her the way someone looks at a package left on the wrong doorstep. Mildly puzzled, mildly inconvenienced. "What legal team?" "Ashwood Partners," Serena said. "Toronto office. I believe the communication went out Tuesday." Gerald studied her. The hoodie, the sneakers, the worn bag. "I'm sorry," he said, and the word sorry had no apology in it whatsoever. "What is this regarding?" "The property," she said simply. He blinked. "The property, the Halliburton Grand, and the other 7 properties in the portfolio." Silence. The kind that has weight. Gerald let out a small breath that was almost a laugh. "I'm going to need you to be more specific, because this morning is extremely Gerald." A woman appeared from the management corridor. She was moving fast, her heels clicking hard against the marble. This was Elspeth Morrow, 47, the hotel's director of operations, with reading glasses pushed up into her auburn hair, and a look on her face that Nathaniel had never seen before. A look that, if he had to name it, he would call fear. She stopped beside Gerald and spoke quietly, but not quietly enough. "She's the new owner." The acquisition closed at midnight. The lobby did not stop moving. The tour group kept murmuring. A bellhop wheeled a luggage cart past. Somewhere near the bar, a glass clinked, but at the front desk, everything went completely still. Gerald first turned back to Serena. She hadn't moved. Her expression hadn't changed. She was watching him with those calm, familiar eyes, and she looked like someone who had been waiting a long time for this particular moment, and had decided long ago that she wasn't going to perform anything when it finally arrived. "But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up, because what happened in those 11 minutes between when Serena Blacho-Conquo walked through those front doors and when Elspeth Morrow appeared from the corridor, those 11 minutes are the part of this story that I can't stop thinking about." Gerald first had not made it to where he was by being careless. In 11 years as GM of the Halliburton Grand, he had managed crises, celebrity guests, a kitchen fire, a failed health inspection, and a union dispute that lasted 8 months. He knew how to read a room. He knew how to read people. Or he thought he did. When he walked back from the elevator bank and looked at Serena again, really looked, the thing he saw was a young black woman in a hoodie who had walked into one of the most expensive hotels on Bay Street and claimed to have a meeting with him about the property. No appointment. No name he recognized. No presentation folder. No assistant. No business card extended across the desk. What he felt, though he would never have used this word, was dismissal. A quick internal calculation that placed her in a category of people who did not belong in this particular lobby on this particular morning. And then he made a decision that would define the rest of his career. "I'm going to have to ask you to wait in the seating area over there," he said, gesturing toward a cluster of chairs near the window. The chairs where they put people when they wanted to make clear that their request had been filed and would be addressed eventually. "Nathaniel will get you a coffee. I have a meeting at 9, and we can reconnect after." "I'd rather we speak now," Serena said. "I'm sure you would." He smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had decided the conversation was already over. "But that's not how my morning works. If you have business with this hotel, you can leave your contact information with the desk, and someone from our team will follow up." Serena looked at him for a moment. "The acquisition closed at midnight," she said. "Which means as of today, I own this hotel. I understand you have a busy morning, but this conversation isn't optional." Gerald's jaw tightened. He looked at Nathaniel as if Nathaniel might offer some explanation. Nathaniel offered none. "That is a significant claim," Gerald said carefully. "It is," she agreed, "and you have documentation of this. My lawyers do. You'll have received." "I haven't received anything," Gerald said, and now his voice had an edge to it. And I have to tell you, this kind of thing, people walking in off the street with claims like this, he exhaled. It's not the first time. I've had people tell me they've booked the penthouse suite for 6 months. I've had people tell me they're food critics. I've had all kinds of Gerald. A hand on his arm. Annette, of all people, quiet and careful. Maybe we should just. He shook her off. I'm going to be very clear, he said, turning back to Serena, his voice lowering to something that the people nearby could still hear if they were paying attention, and several of them were. This is a private establishment. If you have a legitimate business claim, you go through proper channels. You do not walk in here dressed like... He stopped. The lobby had gotten quieter. He'd noticed it too, a half-second too late. Dressed like what? Serena asked. The words were quiet, entirely neutral, but they landed like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples went out across the lobby and touched every single person standing in it. A couple near the breakfast display had turned around. The bellhop with the luggage cart had stopped. Dev at the concierge desk was very still. Gerald first recovered quickly, or tried to. Like someone who isn't here for a professional purpose. Based on what? She said. He had no answer for that. He had an answer, but not one he could say out loud, and they both knew it, and by now most of the lobby knew it too. This conversation is over, he said. I'll need you to leave. Serena didn't move, not a single inch. Gerald? Elspeth Morrow's heels on the marble. Gerald, stop. He turned. She was walking fast from the corridor, glasses pushed up, that expression on her face. Fear, Nathaniel would think later, but more specific than that. It was the look of someone who had been CC'd on an email that they'd read too late. She stopped beside him. She's the new owner. The acquisition closed at midnight. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Nathaniel O.C. Crane had ever heard inside a hotel lobby. Gerald first looked at Elspeth. He looked at Serena. He looked back at Elspeth. What? Halliburton Hospitality Group completed a sale to Blatch-Okonkwo Capital Partners at midnight Tuesday. I got the confirmation email this morning at 7:45. I thought. Elspeth's voice was steady, but her hands were not. I thought you'd seen it. I haven't, the full portfolio, Elspeth said. All 8 properties. Gerald turned back to Serena. She was looking at him with the same calm she'd had since she walked through the doors. Not triumphant, not satisfied, just present. Would you like to go to your office? She said. We can talk there. And this right here is the moment that I think about most, because Gerald first did not immediately say yes. He stood in the middle of his lobby, the lobby he'd run for 11 years, the marble floors he'd overseen, the staff he'd hired, the reputation he'd built, and he made one more calculation.
He straightened his jacket.
He looked at the people watching, and in a voice that was precise and controlled and wrong in every single way, he said, I'm going to need to verify this before we go anywhere. We do not simply hand over access to a senior management area based on an unconfirmed Gerald. Elspeth put her hand on his arm firmly this time. Stop talking. He stopped. Serena reached into her canvas tote and pulled out a single envelope. She held it out to Gerald. The executed agreement and proof of transfer. Ashwood Partners can be reached at the number on the cover page. I'd suggest calling them now. Gerald took the envelope. He didn't open it. He just held it. Nathaniel watched something cross Gerald First's face in that moment. Some private earthquake that didn't show on the surface but that you could feel if you were close enough. 11 years of authority rearranging itself around a new and irreversible fact. I'll need a few minutes, Gerald said. Of course, Serena said. He walked back toward the corridor. He did not walk quickly. He walked the way a man walks when he wants to look like he still has somewhere to be. Elspeth let out a long, slow breath. She turned to Serena and extended her hand. I'm Elspeth Morrow, Director of Operations. I'm very sorry about. Thank you, Elspeth, Serena said, shaking her hand. I know this is sudden. I'd like to meet with senior leadership this morning if we can arrange it. Is there a boardroom available? Yes, absolutely. I'll have it set up now. Thank you. Serena turned to the front desk, to Nathaniel, and thank you for this morning, she said, and she meant it specifically, and he knew she knew what she was thanking him for. "Of course," he said. She followed Elspeth toward the corridor. The lobby exhaled. The boardroom on the 40th floor looked out over the city on three sides. The lake a gray gleam to the south, the financial district stacked up to the north, a sky the color of old pewter pressing down on all of it. Serena Blachokonkwo sat at the head of the table. She had not changed out of her hoodie. She had not produced a laptop or a presentation deck. She had a notepad, a pen, and a cup of tea that Elspeth had arranged, and she sat with her hands folded on the table and looked at the people filing in around her with the same expression she'd had in the lobby. Steady, patient, entirely at home. The senior leadership team came in over the course of 10 minutes. Food and beverage, housekeeping, sales, finance, reservations. They filed in with the specific energy of people who had received information 15 minutes ago that had reordered their entire understanding of their professional reality. Gerald first came in last. He sat down near the far end of the table. Not at the other head, he had moved away from that end. Somewhere in the middle. Serena let everyone settle. "Thank you for meeting on short notice," she said. "I know the timing is unusual. I'll try to keep this brief." She paused. Blatcho Conquo Capital Partners completed its acquisition of the Halliburton Hospitality Group as of Tuesday midnight. This affects all 8 properties. I'm here in Toronto because this is the flagship, and because I want to understand how it runs before we make any decisions about the future of the portfolio. She looked around the room. Eyes meeting eyes. No slides, no deck, no corporate language wrapped around a message designed to be interpreted later. "I'm going to be here for the next 2 weeks. I won't be making immediate changes. I'm here to listen and observe. I have questions and I'll be asking them. I want honest answers, not performance." A brief pause. "Is that clear?" People nodded. Some of them looked relieved. Gerald first was looking at the table. "Before we go further," Serena said, "I want to address this morning." The room got quieter. I arrived in the lobby at 8:17. I spent approximately 11 minutes at the front desk, while an attempt was made to have me wait indefinitely in a chair by the window. She said this without heat, without theater, like she was reading from a report she'd already processed and filed. I was spoken to in a way that was inappropriate. I want to name that clearly, not because I want to revisit it at length, but because I think what happens when a guest, or an owner, or anyone, walks into this building and is assessed by how they look is something this team needs to sit with. No one spoke. The front desk supervisor, Nathaniel O.C. Crane, handled himself with professionalism throughout. "I'd like that noted formally." Elspeth wrote something on her notepad. Serena looked at Gerald. Gerald looked up. "Gerald," she said, "I'd like to meet with you separately this afternoon. 2 o'clock, if that works." "Yes," he said. His voice came out flat. "Good." She looked at the rest of the table. "Now, let's talk about the Morrison Group arriving at 9, because I understand that's a priority this morning, and I'd like to understand how we handle large corporate bookings." And just like that, she moved on, because here is what nobody in that boardroom understood yet. What they would come to understand over the following 2 weeks, as Serena moved through every floor of the Halliburton Grand in her hoodie, and her scuffed sneakers and her worn canvas bag, asking quiet questions and getting loud answers. She hadn't arrived that morning to prove anything. She hadn't worn what she wore to make a point. She had worn what she wore because it was what she put on. Because she was 31 years old, and she had spent the last decade building something from nothing. Her father's small property management company in Brampton, which she'd taken over at 22 after his illness, which she'd grown into a development firm, which she'd expanded into acquisitions, which she'd built. Through 10 years of early mornings and late nights and deals that people twice her age had told her were impossible, into something that could write a check large enough to buy a hotel on Bay Street. She had not arrived to be impressive. She had arrived to work. The meeting with Gerald first at 2 o'clock lasted 40 minutes. Nathaniel never knew exactly what was said inside that room, but at 4:15, Gerald first walked out of the hotel with his coat over his arm and did not come back. 2 days later, an internal memo from Elspeth, now interim general manager, announced that Gerald had chosen to pursue other opportunities and that leadership would be contacted regarding next steps. The lobby went on. Guests checked in and checked out. The white orchids were replaced on Thursday mornings. The bar filled up at 6 and emptied out by midnight. But something had changed. Nathaniel felt it most clearly 2 days after Gerald left, when he was doing a handover briefing with the incoming management consultant, and Serena came down through the lobby. She always took the stairs, in the same hoodie, same sneakers, coffee from the Tim Hortons 2 blocks over in her hand, notepad tucked under her arm. She stopped at the desk. Nathaniel Ems Blacho-Conquo. I'm meeting with HR this afternoon about the service standards review. I'd like you to be part of that conversation. You've been here 8 years. I want to hear what you think should change. He looked at her. Yes, he said. I'd like that very much. She nodded and moved on, already writing something on her notepad. Annette, at the desk beside him, exhaled slowly. Did she just? Yes, Nathaniel said. Annette was quiet for a moment. I owe her an apology. I think, Nathaniel said carefully, that's probably accurate. I want to stop here for a moment and talk to you directly. Because this story, the moment Gerald first looked at Serena Blacho-Conquo and decided, in under 3 seconds, what kind of person she was based on what she was wearing. It isn't just about a hotel. It isn't just about one bad manager on one bad morning. It's about a thing that happens every single day, in lobbies and offices and shops and restaurants and parking lots and elevator banks, where someone looks at another person and makes a calculation that has nothing to do with who that person actually is. And the thing is, Gerald wasn't stupid. He wasn't cartoonishly cruel. He was a man who had spent so long in a world where authority looked a certain way, dressed a certain way, arrived a certain way, that he had stopped being able to see it when it showed up differently. He had confused the costume for the person. The saddest part? He never even asked her name. Not once. In 11 minutes at the front desk, not once did he ask Serena her name. He asked Nathaniel. He asked Elspeth. But not her. Because in his mind, she hadn't earned the question yet. She hadn't proven she deserved to be spoken to. And she had already bought the building. Serena Blacho-Conquo spent 2 weeks at the Halliburton Grand. She sat in on kitchen briefings and housekeeping stand-ups and front desk handovers. She ate breakfast in the staff canteen, not the restaurant. She walked the service corridors and the back-of-house areas that guests never see and asked questions about drainage and HVAC and linen suppliers and labor scheduling. She was not performing humility. She genuinely wanted to know how the building worked, because you cannot make something better if you do not understand what it is. On her last morning, she called Nathaniel into the small office that had temporarily been assigned to her. She was packing her canvas bag. The room looked like she'd been there 2 hours, not 2 weeks. I've recommended you for the assistant GM position, she said without preamble. Elspeth has agreed. HR will contact you next week. You don't have to take it, but I wanted you to know it's on the table. Nathaniel sat down. I've worked here 8 years, he said. I know. Gerald passed me over twice for the senior supervisor role. I know that too. He looked at her. Why? She looked back. Because you did your job. The whole morning of March 14th, in the middle of something that would have rattled most people, you just did your job. She picked up her notepad. That's what I look for. She left on a Thursday morning, through the front lobby, canvas bag on her shoulder, coffee in hand. The orchids had just been replaced. The marble floors were polished to a mirror shine. The lobby smelled like it always did. Fresh flowers, expensive leather, the particular clean air of a place designed to make you feel like everything is under control. She walked out the front doors and onto Bay Street without looking back. And the hotel, her hotel, went quietly on. So here's what I want you to take away from this story. The thing that stopped Gerald first, that ended 11 years of authority in 40 minutes in a boardroom, wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't a speech. Serena never raised her voice. She never performed anger, never demanded respect in the way that makes the other person feel justified in withdrawing it. She just didn't leave. She stood at that desk, and she did not move. And she told the truth about who she was in the same even voice she used for everything else. And she waited for reality to catch up with the room. There's something in that worth keeping, because most of us will never buy a hotel. Most of us will never have that kind of card to play. But we've all stood at a desk somewhere and felt the temperature drop and known, without anyone saying it, that we had just been sorted into a category we didn't belong in. And what Serena did, what I keep coming back to, is that she didn't argue with the category. She didn't perform her credentials. She didn't get loud, didn't get hurt, didn't beg to be reconsidered. She just kept being exactly who she was. And she waited. That's it. That's the whole thing. If this story hit you the same way it hit me, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever been underestimated like this? Walked into a room and felt someone decide, before you'd opened your mouth, that you didn't belong? Tell me. I read everyone. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to DELL Stories. I share these kinds of stories every week. Real human moments where dignity wins, even when it takes a little while. Sometimes a long while. But it always does. See you in the next one.